I cannot believe that I am here on Al Gore's internet in the blessed year of the Common Era 2025, protecting and defending Wicca. But here we are! I've been seeing a huge amount of Wicca hate on TikTok and a little bit on Tumblr, but mostly on TikTok. And unfortunately, for my blood pressure and need to be correct, and your patience for the next 30 to 90 minutes, who knows, I'm going to. It's basically all wrong. We've got outdated critiques, misinformation, generalizations about the pagan community and the New Age community, and shoved onto just Wicca. All of these mean that actual problems and actual truth are clouded by bullshit. It's a clusterfuck of witchier than thou, better than thou, holier than thou, and cooler than thou posturing. And I'm here to solve it. In case you got here on my channel and on this video without knowing, Wicca is a neo-pagan religion characterized by calling 4 elements and a god and a goddess in ritual, the god and the goddess being of equal importance, a book of shadows, some shared liturgy, such as the reed and the charge of the goddess. Originally, Wiccans practiced in covens of 13 that were oath-bound, and they practiced naked. They met on full moons and the 8 holidays that make up the wheel of the year, and the tradition was oath-bound and hierarchical. You would have 3 degrees in a coven, and when you got to 3rd degree, you could hive off and form your own coven if you so chose. But now there are an infinite number of traditions with an infinite number of organization structures, beliefs, levels of secrecy, and levels of mystery. And there's a healthy contingent of solitary Wiccans who practice without a coven, and therefore without hierarchy and without the oaths. In the 90s and early 2000s, basically every single witchcraft book or pagan book was published as a Wiccan book, regardless of the actual content. For example, Scott Cunningham didn't really... There's evidence that Scott Cunningham didn't really want to market his stuff as Wiccan. Between this and the shitty behavior of everyone on the internet at the time, Wiccans got a reputation for being fluffy bunnies and annoying and taking up all of the air in the room and just as bad as Christians, or the Christianity of witchcraft. A reputation that is returned today. But, is that reputation deserved? Quick disclaimer for you. I'm not Wiccan. This isn't me trying to set the record straight about my practice and make sure people view me correctly. In fact, doing the research for this has kind of underscored why I'm not Wiccan. I'm doing this instead out of a hatred for misinformation and a respect for what Wicca did for the pagan and witchcraft movements. Wicca was one of the first really publicized, really recruiting pagan religions out there. It was, at the time, one of like 3 non-ceremonial magic orders. It combined this concept of low magic and high magic in a way that was relatively innovative. It was open to people who weren't fucking ultra rich. Like, it's true that Wicca did skew upper middle class and up, but compare that to Thelema or OTO or the Golden Dawn or the Rosicrucians or the Masons, and Wicca was a little more down to earth. Without the New Forest Coven and Papa Gardener, we would not have anywhere near as many modern pagans as we do, and we wouldn't have anywhere near as many traditions. I would not be the druid that I am if Papa Gardener hadn't laid the foundation for the movement to exist. Second obligatory disclaimer is that Wicca is huge and has a lot of different traditions with their own specific quirks, and I can't cover them all. So I'm going to focus on what's common amongst most traditions and what is specifically outlined in Gardnerian Wicca, since that's the first strain. I used a copy of the Gardnerian Book of Shadows that was uploaded to the internet in the 90s, but because it's an oath-bound tradition, I can't prove that it is the Gardnerian Book of Shadows that was used in the 90s, that the Book of Shadows hasn't been drastically changed since then, and that I can't guarantee that the Book of Shadows that was uploaded didn't have some sort of intentional misinformation, and I can't guarantee that it's complete. I can't guarantee that there's not a portion of Gardnerian Wicca that isn't exclusively orally taught. Those are the standard perils of researching a secretive religion. Anyway, with all of that set aside and clarified, Wicca bad?
Wiccan history is bad. Wicca isn't ancient. It's 50 years old. Wicca believes in Margaret Murray's long disproven witch cult hypothesis, and Wicca believes that 9 million women were burned during the burning times.
Except none of that is true anymore. The idea that Wicca is 50 years old is factually, demonstrably, grossly incorrect. Witchcraft Today is the book where Gardner introduced Wicca to the world. He described it as though he was doing an ethnography of a group that he was not a part of. Definitely, for sure. It was published in 1954, meaning that as of time of recording, Wicca is 71 years old. But we have records of Wicca being older. Before Witchcraft Today and before the witchcraft laws were repealed, Gardner published a fiction book called High Magic's Aid in 1949. This included a lot of Wiccan theology and Wiccan practices, like, written into it. So, given that a book isn't written the year it's published, Wicca is minimum born in 1948 when he started writing. But we also have the original Ye Book of Art Magical book of Gardner, and historian Ronald Hutton, who wrote Triumph of the Moon, on which most of this video is based, estimates that the New Forest Coven that Gardner was initiated into was formed in the mid-30s. That means that Wicca is about 90 years old. More importantly, Wicca doesn't claim to be ancient anymore. In the 1950s, Wicca did claim to be ancient, and it claimed to be the inheritor of a very long tradition of pre-Christian witchcraft and magic. The publication of Triumph of the Moon in 2001 pretty much ended that. Triumph of the Moon proved pretty well that there was no continuous tradition of witchcraft from the witch trials to today, and that there was no pan-European witch cult. That was actually already proven, but Triumph of the Moon was the one that made that proof very obvious and available to pagans. At the time that Wicca was founded, and at the time, and for the first several years of its existence, the witch cult hypothesis, as proposed by Margaret Murray, was accepted. It was generally accepted by archaeologists and historians. The witch cult hypothesis, which, for those of you who don't know, is a hypothesis that all of Europe before Christianity was, and maybe even before like their individual paganisms, was part of one universal witch religion, which worshipped a triple goddess and a horned god of the hunt, and which survived in pockets, and that's what the Inquisition was really about, was finding the pockets of the old witch cult, and that all festivals that we have nowadays are rooted in the festivals of the old witch cult. At the time that Wicca was first founded, and that the books about it were first published, this was a widely accepted hypothesis. It wasn't until the 70s, mid-70s? It wasn't until the 70s that it fell out of fashion, and that's amongst historians. Regular people's understanding of history trails academia's by a bit, because the internet didn't exist back then. Nowadays, Wicca doesn't teach the witch cult hypothesis. Nowadays, Wicca doesn't teach the burning times that 9 million women were burned at the stake for being witches or being suspected witches. Again, at the time that Wicca was being founded, it did believe that, but the popularity of that idea died out. Frankly, I see the whole 9 million witches and the witch trials were about witches a lot more on TikTok than I see it from Wiccans. Now, I'm saying that witches don't believe this anymore. What's my proof? And when does that change happen? I grabbed all of the books about Wicca that I had access to and that were published between 2000 and 2005 to try to like pinpoint when that happens. In 2001, DJ Conway published Wicca, The Complete Craft, which does use witch cult and ancient histories and burning times. All of that's mentioned. It was not until World War II was on the horizon that Gerald Gardner, a retired British civil servant, discovered that little pockets of witchcraft did survive. He wrote that he contacted the remains of a witch group in the New Forest and was initiated into the craft. Wicca for Life, 2001, Raymond Buckland, tries to kind of have it both ways by saying that like religio magic survived, but that Wicca isn't necessarily that religio magic, and that like it's not an unbroken line. Finding that witchcraft was actually the continuation of an ancient pre-Christian religion, and not at all the dark evil practice he had always been led to believe it was, Gardner was delighted. Meanwhile, in 2001, Exploring Wicca by Lady Sabrina explicitly repudiates the idea that Wicca is ancient. Witchcraft, or Wicca as we know it today, is not the sole survivor of antiquity, nor is it an entirely modern creation. Rather, it is a blend of many different spiritual persuasions. Despite the fact that pagan rites, shamanic customs, and goddess worship predate Christianity, there is still no reliable evidence of an established Wiccan religion before 1951. In 2003, the Dragon Tradition of Wicca had their course on Wicca called Maiden Moon, and it again says that Wicca is not ancient and that the witch cult hypothesis is bullshit. Some authors expressed that during the Burning Times, a form of an ancient fertility religion had been flourishing and was being systematically stamped out by Christianity, which feared being overthrown. In almost all cases, the academic quality of the research was, and I am being nice here, definitely substandard. Somewhere in this period, most likely 1947 to 1948, Gardner created a manuscript known as Ye Book of Ye Mart Magical, possibly based on the operational grimoire of New Forest Coven. In today's terms, Ye Book was the first book of shadows, and its creation marks the beginning of orthodox traditional Wicca. 2006's Wicca Revealed by Pino Longchild includes quotes from Triumph of the Moon to point out that Wicca is not ancient, and says that nowadays most Wiccans agree that Wicca is a modern synthesis of practices. So I couldn't pinpoint the exact date when everybody agrees, but it's definitely people knew, or Wiccans knew and were telling each other that Wicca isn't ancient as early as 2001, and they likely all agreed by 2006. It's been 20 years since Wicca teaches that it's ancient has been a valid critique. The next batch of critiques that people have against Wicca are all against Gerald Gardner himself. Gerald Gardner was a sexual predator and a weird, horny old man, and he just wanted to look at girls naked. He was a kinkster and a misogynist, and he's just a bad man. Source needed! It's true that Gardner's Wicca had people practice skyclad, and that the initiations included being bound at the wrists and sometimes by the ankles, and led around and blindfolded and lashed with a flogger or flogged. That is all true. But the reason that people are skyclad isn't because Gardner wanted to look at hot young women, because most of the women and most of the people in his covens were in their middle ages. The reason he had people practice naked is because he was an ardent nudist, naturist. He thought that nudism, occasional nudism, was part of what helped him overcome his horrific asthma. So for him, the nudity wasn't sexual, it was about health, and he believed it was good for the soul, basically. I believe, I will have to check later, that nakedness is also seen in the Gospel of Aradia, Goddess of the Witches, whatever the book is, by Charles Leland, which purports to be an ancient pre-Christian witchcraft tradition, which deals a lot in the concept of liberation, and part of that liberation is being naked. As for sexual misdeeds, I couldn't find any indication that he assaulted or did anything unwanted to any of his high priestesses, or to anyone in general. He might have had an affair with one of his priestesses, but I don't consider that sexual misconduct, because if she consented, that's fine. Like, it sucks for his wife, but that's fine. He did have a lot of high priestesses. He initiated a lot of people quickly. Not because he wanted the hottest, newest young thing at all times. Again, most of them were middle-aged by the time they were initiated. But because he was trying to found as many covens as he could as quickly as possible. The Gardnerian Book of Shadows has in it instructions on how to combine the first, second, and third degree initiations into one day's worth of initiations, which is wild when you think that nowadays you generally have to wait a year and a day between initiations. As for the flogging, that was not for BDSM reasons, but because it was a way to achieve altered consciousness. Gardner couldn't run. See the horrific asthma. Instead of running, instead of doing weird breathing, he would flog himself. Not painfully, just enough to raise blood, like draw blood to the area that was flogged, and then that would, the blood being drawn away from the brain, put you into a meditative state. Wiccan covens that weren't his started doing the spiral dance instead of flogging because they found it worked better for them. The Gardnerian Book of Shadows has a section on ways to achieve trance, which includes the flogging as well as 7 other methods: meditation, drugs, chanting, physical exercise, and provides instructions on using multiple of those together. So the flogging wasn't inherent and wasn't like, this isn't a sex cult that does BDSM. The blindfolds and the ties and the being led around could smell kinky if you're a prude. If you look at the way they're used, it's exclusively in initiations in a way that's very similar to Masonic initiations. Gerald Gardner was a Freemason and drew a lot of that structure into Wicca. That's why there's 3 degrees of Wicca, to match the 3 degrees of Freemasonry. And the bondage and the blindfolds are not there to leave you in that state, but rather as symbols of ignorance and oppression. And then part of the initiation is having the blindfold removed and having the ties cut. The liberation and freedom and knowledge that the initiation gives you. So it wasn't about kink, it wasn't about control, it wasn't about power, it was about giving you power. Also, not to be that guy, but just because a person is kinky and does weird sex stuff, just because a magical tradition does weird sex stuff, doesn't mean that the person or the tradition are evil and wicked. People can be horny, and that can be magical. Some people point out that Gerald Gardner really liked Aleister Crowley, and that Aleister Crowley is one of the world's biggest Semites, racists, misogynists, and just problematic guys. I'm not gonna argue that. Guy fucking sucks. It's not clear how much Crowley liked him. If Crowley adored Gerald Gardner, then that would mean that maybe Gardner was on board with a lot of his anti-Semitism, but we don't know. And it's not clear how many of Crowley's problems TM spread to Gardner. I read through the Gardnerian Book of Shadows and I didn't see anything that smelled like racism or misogyny or anti-Semitism. There's a small asterisk on misogyny, we'll come back to that. And Doreen Valiente, frankly, should be considered the mother of Wicca, if Gardner is the father, because she went through the Book of Shadows and rewrote huge swaths to remove Crowley's influence and the OTO ceremonial magic influence, and really helped Wicca become more of its own individual thing away from those ceremonial traditions. So while it's possible that Gerald Gardner being in love with Crowley is a problem, the amount of Crowley influence that's left in the religion is negligible. And of course, people love to bring up that Gerald Gardner was a plantation owner and a slave owner, and all of Wicca is therefore evil and based in the words of a slaver. He did manage a plantation in Sri Lanka from 1907 to 1911, and he did own a plantation in Malaysia from 1911 to 1923. I don't love that. But you have to remember that in the United States, plantations and slave owning are synonymous. Like, there's no plantation in the States that was not powered by enslaved people. Sri Lanka, Malaysia, Southeast Asia, That's not as true. People were getting paid, and the reason that we know that people weren't enslaved and they were getting paid is because Gardner, when he was managing a plantation, that plantation fought upper management to increase the pay for the people working. He made friends with the people working the plantations. He didn't view them as subhuman. He was probably standard racist about it, you know, thinks he's more civilized, thinks he's more intellectual or whatever, in a way that just everyone from that time is. But you can't really say that he was a slave owner at all and that his owning and managing a plantation is on the same level as anything that happened in the United States. Gerald Gardner was a raging fucking homophobe. We'll get to that in a minute, but it's honestly kind of baffling. And that is a genuine criticism to have. We'll talk about that more in a second, but that's a good criticism. That being said, I don't think that Gerald Gardner being a bad man means that all of Wicca is bad. Because Wicca isn't just him anymore, and it hasn't been since he died in 65. 65? 64? Hasn't been since he died. Like I said, Doreen Valiente wrote and rewrote huge portions of the Book of Shadows. She's the one who wrote The Charge of the Goddess, all of the good stuff. And even if you're Gardnerian, every single coven between Gardner and you has put their own impact on the religion. Every single writer who has founded their own tradition has had their own impact, and every coven between whoever founded that tradition and you has had an impact and shaped the tradition and shaped Wicca. So the worst parts of Gardner are washed out and washed away by everyone who says no to that and everyone who decides to make something better. Some of the critique of Wicca is about its cosmology and theology. Wiccans are duotheists who are culturally insensitive. To collapse every god into one god and every goddess into one goddess is mean and culturally appropriative and wrong. I don't mean to be this girl. But Wicca is an orthopraxy, not an orthodoxy. To be Wiccan, you must do Wiccan things. You must be initiated into a tradition, and you must practice the magic and celebrate the holy days. And technically, Wicca doesn't care what you believe. It's not like Christianity, where every week you affirm that you believe in Christ and that Christ is the only Son of God and that Christ was sacrificed in order to provide a path to salvation, whatever. You don't have to do that. You can be a hard polytheist who thinks that the god and goddess of Wicca are their own unique entities who are not similar to anybody else. You can be a monotheist who thinks that the god and goddess are two sides of the actual godhead, but like there is only one godhead. You can also be a monotheist who just only worships the goddess, like Dianic Wicca. You can be an atheist who thinks that the god and the goddess are like archetypes or metaphors, and then the magic you practice works through psychology. You can be agnostic and not really know or care. All of that's valid. More to the point, I also don't think that duotheism like that, or collapsing the deities into one or two or however many, is inherently culturally insensitive, unless you're telling people and proselytizing about it. There's a difference between thinking that all goddesses are one goddess and that a prayer to Aphrodite and a prayer to Yemaya both reach the same ears. Or there's a difference between thinking that and telling somebody that Yemaya is just Aphrodite, is just Freya, and there's no point in worshipping Yemaya as her own person. The problem is not in what you believe, the problem is in how you treat that belief and how you treat others about your belief. Wicca is homophobic. Inherently, it's transphobic. It is so focused on fertility and binaries and duality, that there's no space for any sort of queer. This is almost a valid point. Because, as I mentioned, Gardner was hella homophobic. Lois Bourne is one of his high priestesses, mentioned that thought that being queer, specifically a gay man, was a flagrant transgression of the natural law, and that denying the fertility is wrong, and that's why the Templars failed, because the Templars tried to do magic together, but they were like doing butt fucking, and therefore the curse of the goddess destroyed the Templars. He straight up said, according to her, there are no homosexual witches. It is impossible to be a homosexual witch. This does show up in Wicca, specifically in the Witches' Laws, which are an addition to the Book of Shadows from 1957 that were pretty explicitly written to address that there were some covens that disagreed with him. It's not a great look for him. In the Witches' Laws, along with stuff about secrecy and along with stuff about high priestesses bowing out and leaving the role when they get too old, says, "It has been found that practicing the art doth cause a fondness between aspirant and tutor, and this is the cause of better results if this be so. And if for any reason this be undesirable, it can be easily avoided by both persons from the outset firmly resolving in their minds to be as brother and sister, or parent and child. And it is for this reason that a man may be taught only by a woman, and a woman by a man, and a woman and woman should not attempt these practices together. So it be ordained." So he's saying pretty explicitly, it's okay to fuck your coven mate as long as they're a different gender than you. Therefore, since the beginning of Wicca, there have been covens and traditions that are homophobic, either explicitly the way Gardner was, or kind of subtly and socially by focusing on hilarity and the importance of like having an equal number of men and women in the coven and like alternating between men and women so you can like create an electric charge or something. That did exist. The Minoan Brotherhood is a initiatory tradition for gay men that was founded in the 70s specifically in response to Gardnerian homophobia. But you'll notice that the year is 2025. It's been a lot of years since the 70s, and the tradition has grown past Gardner's original homophobia. Like I said, it's taken on the influence of every single teacher and writer and witch since then, and Wicca is a lot more liberal than it used to be. In 2003, Christopher Penczak published Gay Witchcraft, which was about rituals and practices and writing about being a gay man and a Wiccan. Those who felt disenfranchised from mainstream faiths, continually searching for their path, often found their way to Wicca. Quite a few of these folks were gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgendered, coming from feelings and experiences very similar to mine, now feeling the sense of coming home again. Modern witchcraft offers quite a bit to the gay community. I found a sense of belonging, not necessarily to a larger group, a physical community, but a belonging in my own spirit, an understanding that people like me have a rich spiritual tradition. All I had to do was reclaim it for myself. Rather than simply tolerating my kind, these ancient traditions celebrated our existence. Embracing those who are different is a way to learn. Wicca has been very pro-queer since at least 2003 and much earlier. Now, these same beliefs and quotes from Gardner are a reason why some covens might have been and might still be incredibly transphobic, which sucks. But again, modern day Wicca has become a home, like all witchcraft, for the queer. I will mention that Dianic Wicca, which is supposedly feminist, was founded by Z Budapest, is pretty turfy. Z Budapest is an unrepentant transphobe. But Dianic Wicca being transphobic doesn't mean that all Wicca is transphobic. The last common piece of slander against Wiccan cosmology is that the Wiccan Rede and the threefold law are victim blamey, and they limit your action and make you put up with abuse. What? The Wiccan Rede originally is just an et harmnum, do what you will. And then 8 words the Wiccan Rede fulfill, an et harmnum, do what you will. And here means if, so if it harms nobody, do what you will. Which doesn't say don't harm anyone. It says as long as you're not harming anyone, do whatever you want. I have no notes. Also, Rede here means advice. So the advice is go for it if it doesn't hurt anyone. And then if it's going to hurt somebody, think about it, basically. I will also note don't hurt anyone is about as milquetoast and common as a concept in religion as anything else. It's nice to be nice. It doesn't inherently mean don't curse your abuser. It doesn't inherently mean don't be like you're a sinner if you curse your abuser. The Wiccan Read is only victim blaming if somebody uses it to blame you. As for the threefold law, the threefold law is nowadays the concept that everything you put out will return to you threefold. So if you are good, the universe will give you 3 times amount of good. If you are mean to someone, the universe will be 3 times as mean to you. Except this comes from one of the Gardnerian initiations. As part of the initiation, the supplicant is flogged 40 times and then given the flogger and told, now you flog me, the initiator, 120 times. Because a witch is obligated to return everything that comes at them 3 times. So if somebody hurts you, you have to do 3 times more hurt. And if someone is nice to you, you need to return that generosity 3 times. 3 times over. It's not a law about the universe the way there is the law of conservation of momentum. It's a law as in something witches have to do, that the witch is the one who abides by this law. And it doesn't say, don't hurt your abuser. It says, it is incumbent upon you, if you are abused, to be 3 times as bad to the one who hurt you. That ain't victim blaming. And now we come to the most bonkers and batshit set of accusations about Wicca. I'm going to tell you every single one of these things that people have accused Wicca of culturally appropriating. Every single one I've seen with my eyes, okay? People think that the only ones who culturally appropriate of the entire witchcraft community are Wiccans, and that Wicca is in its entirety cultural appropriation. Fucking batshit. The threefold law, and reincarnation in Wicca are both stolen from Hinduism. Actual take. And an actual take that just tells me that you don't know anything about Hinduism. Because as I said, the threefold law is not a law of the universe. It is a guidance for your action. And even if we take the modern understanding of the threefold law, that the universe will return to you 3 times as much energy as you put out, that's not what karma is. Western people think that karma is you do something good, good stuff happens to you in this lifetime. You do something bad, bad stuff happens to you in this lifetime. That's not karma. Karma is, at the end of your life, the culmination and the summation of everything you've done. Whether you've been, done virtuous and good things, where you've done wicked things, whether you've acted within your role. And then basically the end result is your karma, which helps decide how you are reincarnated in your next life. Related, reincarnation in Wicca is kind of loosey-goosey. People think that you're reincarnated, and according to witchcraft today, some of the purpose of Wiccan ritual is to ensure that when you are reincarnated within your clan or within your community. You're not reincarnated somewhere else, right? Reincarnation in Hinduism is very specific. If you have more good karma than that bad karma, if you did good, you are reincarnated as a higher order of being until eventually, in higher and higher and higher, until eventually you are enlightened and are united with godhood. And if you do shit, you're a bad guy, you are reincarnated into a lower order of being, lower and lower, until you learn the correct things. Sometimes Wiccan reincarnation does have this idea of you learn different lessons in your life and you are reincarnated sometimes as a higher being, or it's not necessarily in this great chain of being. maybe this life I learned whatever lessons I need to learn, and the next life that I have, I might not be born a human. I might not even be born as like some sort of nice spirit. I might be reborn as a scarab beetle because that life has the lesson that I'm supposed to learn, that my soul has to learn. In part because Wicca and paganism tends to see all life as equally valid. The elemental tools, the wand, athame, pentacle, and chalice, are the talismans of Celtic polytheism. Again, I have to stress to you that this is an actual take I've seen, and it's wrong on 2 counts. 1, these elemental tools are pulled from ceremonial magic and tarot, not from the 4 treasures. Tarot and also just cards had the swords, wands, coins, cups, suits as far back as the 11th century, and you can see this today in Italian or Spanish suited decks. And the reason that Wicca has it is because Wicca is very much inheriting from and aping ceremonial magic, Thelema, etc. This is a case not of cultural appropriation, but of cultural diffusion over time. Also, Celtic polytheism didn't exist in the year 1935. It didn't exist for a while. The original people who believed that the 4 treasures, the Sword of Nuada, the Spear of Llw, the Stone of Fall, and Andagda's Cauldron, the original people who believed that those were the treasures and who believed in Andagda and Llw and Nuada, all of those people were fully fucking dead and had been dead for a while by the time that Wicca was being created. Because Christianity had won, it had done its job. And you can't steal from dead people. Incidentally, calling those 4 treasures the elemental treasure, like similar as the elemental tools of Wicca, is a deep misunderstanding of these things. The wand and the athame in Wicca are tools to direct energy and like command forces. They are not weapons. The pentacle is a surface on which you put offerings and food to be blessed for cakes and ale, and the chalice is a chalice from which one drinks. Meanwhile, the Sword of Nuada is a sword. It is a weapon. It is kind of like an athame. Meanwhile, the Spear of Llw is not a wand. It is explicitly a weapon. It's not a baton. It's a weapon that has to be kept in water, in a jug of water, in order to stop from catching fire. Wands aren't like that. The Cauldron of Andagda and the chalice are both vessels, but a chalice represents water and the womb and is for drinking wine out of, but like small amounts of wine, whereas the Cauldron of Andagda is so fucking big that no army can turn away from it unfed. It is a symbol of Andagda's hospitality and wealth. It's not symbolic of water. It has no associations with water. It has no associations with like a small drink. And the Stone of Fall is not a small stone. It's not a thing that you put stuff on and as for blessings. It's not a representation of the element of earth. It is a stone, like a big old stone, and when the true king of Ireland steps on it, it cries out. So it's a test for sovereignty and kingship, and it's a symbol of Ireland, not elemental earth. Do you see the difference? We got some shit that apparently Wicca stole from Christianity, like the belt, like the cord used sometimes to close robes is the cincture of Christianity. The chalice is a communion chalice, and a wickening is just a baptism. One, you can't steal from Christianity. Christianity is trying to thrust itself upon you. Anything it gives you, you can take and use as much as you want, because they're doing violence on you. It's a fucking imperialist religion. Do what you want with it. The idea of using a rope to close your robe is not exclusively Christian. It's not something unique from them. Even the word cincture, is not a sacred word. The rope is not sacred. The chalice and a communion chalice are kind of similar, I'll give you that, but the concept of a cup that is holy, that everybody drinks from, is not unique to Christianity, and even if it were, steal it. And then a wickening is not a baptism. It's not a universal thing in Wicca. It is a baby blessing, basically. It's just introducing your kid to the gods and going, yep, I love it. Please protect it until it's old enough to be Wiccan itself. A baptism is specifically removing the original sin from the child so that if the child dies, it is not in a state of sin. It doesn't go to hell. There is no original sin in Wicca. That is a uniquely Christian concept. As such, a Wiccaning, which doesn't remove original sin, is not anything like a baptism. Another actual real life take I've seen is that the spear being used as a symbol of the horned god is stealing from Norse paganism. One, Norse paganism didn't exist, baby. Can't steal from a dead guy. Even nowadays, I don't think they would, like, if you were to invent, it has a new tradition, take that concept, I don't think the Norse would care. Like, modern Norse pagans wouldn't care if somebody else used a spear as a symbol of a god. Also, this concept isn't really a thing that Wicca does. Like, they can do it. Robert Cochrane's traditional witchcraft does use a stang as a representation of their horned god, but a stang and a spear are different. A stang is like a big staff with like a fork on the end, and a spear doesn't have a fork on the end. White sage and spirit animals and Palo Santo are all Native American traditions. That's true, baby! Also, Wicca doesn't necessarily do them. This is a criticism to have for paganism and New Agers and spiritual but not religious people, much more than you have to have this conversation with Wiccans. Like, every white person does need to remember that spirit animals and white sage and Palo Santo don't belong to them, but I don't see Palo Santo in witchcraft stores anywhere near as much as I see them in kind of spiritual, kind of like hippy dippy gift shops, you know? The Sabbats are all stolen from Celtic paganism or other paganisms. You can't appropriate from dead people. The Wheel of the Year consists of solstices and equinoxes, which everybody has, and the 4 fire festivals of Ireland. It's really just taking the names from them in a way that Christianity also already took them. Christianity already kind of adopted these holidays into themselves and into English practice, so an English guy using them isn't appropriating from Celtic paganism. The word Sabbath is appropriating the Sabbath of Judaism. That's incorrect. The word Sabbath is used in Jewish traditions, and it's also used in Christian traditions. There's no implying that a Sabbath in paganism is like a Jewish Sabbath. The spelling is different, the activities are different, and the word Sabbath is more intended to evoke the idea of the witches' Sabbath, which is a medieval story or conception of how witches celebrate, which is an inversion of the Christian Sabbath. Tarot is appropriating Romani practices. Congratulations, you did an anti-Ziganism. It is probable that tarot cards have roots in Egypt. Tarot didn't start being used as a divination tool until France in the 1700s. They linked the cards to the Romani in order to exoticize the cards and make them seem cool. But it's not something that the Romani did until after it was already associated with them. They didn't actually, like, the Romani communities didn't use tarot until about the 20th century, and also the Romani don't come from Egypt. So saying that the tarot is an ancient Romani practice is an anti-Ziganism. So what's happening, my dudes? What the fuck made this happen? I see three, some number of main themes. The first is conflating Wicca with all of paganism, the New Age community, and the spiritual but not religious groups. It's true. White people love to do a cultural appropriation. They love to talk about chakras and orishas and karma, but none of those are in the Book of Shadows. They aren't inherent to Wicca the way that the Charge of the Goddess is. If you want to criticize people using these, you need to criticize everybody, not just Wiccans. There's also a big old thinking that Wicca is a monolith, and that monolith is the worst version of every single thing you've seen from any Wiccan. all Wiccans are as annoying as the worst person you see in the comments. Never think that whoever is in the comments is a representative sample. The only reason, like, the only type of person who writes a comment is the type of person who thinks that what they're saying needs to be said, and that's not most reasonable people. Also, every coven is independent. For all of that, even like the more traditional covens, Gardnerians, Alexandrians, etc., have lineages. The covens are, and it's not like Christianity where if the Pope says something, everybody should be believing it. Every coven is independent, and that means that if there's a coven that is really fucking noxious, that might just be them. There's also like a repetition of criticisms from the 2000s, which I think is really funny. So specifically that Wicca is only 50 years old line is just extra funny to me because in the year 2000, saying that Wicca was 50 years old was kind of correct. It's so deeply incorrect now that the only reason you would say that Wicca is 50 years old is if you had heard someone else say that Wicca was 50 years old, and that person hadn't updated their mental model since the year 2000. It's also been 20 years since Triumph of the Moon came out, when a lot of Wiccans did think their religion was ancient and that there were 9 million people burned in the Burning Times and that there was a pan-European witch cult. The only reason you would say that Wiccans believe that is if you heard someone else say that Wiccans believe that and they hadn't updated their information since the year 2000. Pagans are always trying to look cool in front of one another, and claiming that your religion is more authentic and stronger and older and better is one thing, but saying that your religion is older than a specific religion or it's cooler than a specific religion, putting another religion down in order to raise yours up, is a lot easier to do. Also, fucking nobody fact checks anymore. Nobody fact checks. Nobody does any research because TikTok is a cesspit of ignorance. Anyway, thanks for coming on this little ride with me, learning about Wicca, learning about pagan history in general, and learning about what is and isn't cultural appropriation. I'm Kate Bogg, one of many lanterns. Like and subscribe and comment and hype. Tell me if there are other pieces of misinformation in the pagan community you'd like me to debunk or look into. Tell me if there's other myths that you want me to look into or other traditions you want me to look into and give you like a rundown. I post videos at least once a month. Sometimes they are recipes or makeup looks or crafts. Sometimes they're deep dives into a topic that has to do with the pagan community or with the concept of priestessing. The more you interact, the more I know that this is worthwhile, and the more that I know that somebody, at least, knows that Wicca isn't 50 years old. This has been Kate Bogg, one of many lanterns. Keep shining bright. This is the second time filming this because the first time I was wearing a necklace that like rubbed up against the lav mic and made the audio unusable, and I'm so frustrated because my look that day was a lot better. But I'm fine. It's fine.